So when we talk about Venus and all the carbon dioxide in its atmosphere, it's always a good time to just talk a little bit more about CO2 in general, the carbon dioxide in general. So that's what I'd like to do here. So here's a professional graphic that I found on NASA's website that discusses the whole greenhouse effect. And so you can see, of course, there's always number one here. Light does come from the sun, as always. And number two down here, it says about half of the solar radiation is absorbed by the Earth's surface down here. So you see the sunlight coming down and hitting the Earth's surface and getting absorbed. And of course, when it gets absorbed here, as it says, the radiation, of course, they mean the sunlight, is converted into heat energy, causing the emission of long infrared wavelength radiation back into the atmosphere. So that's sort of the third step right here that I was discussing. Rocks will be rocks, so they sort of absorb the sunlight, convert a lot of light to heat, but then some of this infrared is re-emitted into the atmosphere. And so you can see, just like in some of the slides that I did here, they even did a color change on the radiation. So here's the sunlight going down, and there's the infrared going back up. Okay, now so the next important step here is number 4, as you might guess here. Some of the infrared radiation passes through the atmosphere and back out into outer space. No big deal. It's just sort of lost sunlight energy here. Then the key thing for us, at least living on Earth here, is, let's just say this is number 5 right here, is that some of the infrared radiation is absorbed and re-emitted by greenhouse gas molecules. Now, what are greenhouse gas molecules? Well, carbon dioxide is one, but so is water vapor, and so is something like methane, CH4. So water is, of course, just a big part of the water cycle on Earth here, and it's just sort of part of what we are here, water on Earth. Carbon dioxide, of course, as you know, comes from fossil fuels and burning them. And CH4, actually, believe it or not, the major producer of this methane are cow farts, believe it or not. That's where a lot of methane comes from. So you see you have this human activity here, in particular burning of the fossil fuels, making carbon dioxide, and of course the high dependency on meat for our diets and things, for the cows and dairy and things that produce cow farts. All of these are greenhouse gases that get emitted into our atmosphere. And so they're the ones that are going to play this role here of some of the infrared radiation is getting re-emitted by the greenhouse gas molecules, and they can be trapped, making the Earth warmer, as you know. So it's sort of a nice graphic there. So here's a shot of Venus once again here. And so in light of that here, this is one of the best pictures taken here. This is the Venera spacecraft that we discussed, Soviet Union launching back in the 70s. And just sort of take a minute and just reflect and look at the atmosphere here. It just doesn't look very nice. And so it's just a very dense, thick atmosphere with carbon dioxide and some of those other bad things, the sulfuric acid and that sort of things. It's like something like 100 times the Earth's pressure there, and it's just kind of icky. But as you just sort of reflect on this picture here, it's very, very hot there because of all that infrared radiation that would just be trapped in this region here by the rocks. This thick blanket of an atmosphere just has a really hard time letting that heat go into outer space, and so it's just very, very hot here. So this is a picture of Venus. When you look at Venus or think about Venus like that, yeah, there's the clouds. It makes the planet so bright in our night sky, very easy to spot and almost stunning how bright it is, because a lot of that sunlight that just comes in just reflects off those clouds. Clouds reflect a lot of sunlight, but of course some go down into the surface of the planet and do all the greenhouse mechanisms that we just discussed. But when you just sort of reflect on this planet here, it is hot. It is a very, very, very hot planet. In fact, these clouds here almost act like a blanket for that infrared radiation. So that's Venus for you there, and I think that's the most important thing to remember about that planet is, boy, it is a hot one. Okay, so in the next video, I'm going to give you a little more talk on carbon dioxide as it relates to being on Earth.